This man has married the perfect woman, but he's about to see something while she showers that will bring his entire fantasy crashing down. A car comes rushing down the road, looking like it's being driven by someone who is panicking. Hitting the sides of the road, it drags across the railing, creating sparks that fly everywhere. Inside the car, a man is desperately avoiding the touch of his wife, Addie. Addie tells him that he promised to love her, no matter the circumstances. She adds that he promised to love her for what is inside, and not what she looks like. Completely freaking out, Norman insists that Addie should get away from him. As this continues, the car crashes into a truck and explodes. Flames engulf the car and kill the man instantly. Through the flames, Addie walks out completely unscathed. She looks back at the car in disappointment and continues walking away. Next, a man named Norman Glass is speaking to his colleague, Roy, and the two exit Norman's office to continue the conversation. A young blonde woman arrives at the reception, and it seems that she can hear the two men talking from afar. She hears Norman talking about a woman who recently suffered a loss and empathizing with her. She asks the receptionist to point her in the direction of Norman's office. The receptionist sends the woman to his office, where she finds a picture of a woman on his desk. Before Norman returns to the room, the woman transforms her into a beautiful brunette resembling the woman in the picture and introduces herself as Addie. Fast forward to 1 year later, Norman and Addie celebrate their first wedding anniversary with their friends Barbara and Dennis, who are also celebrating their first wedding anniversary. They reminisce on their wedding, laughing at the funny moments they experienced. Dennis thanks Addie for helping him meet Barbara, who he believes is the most beautiful woman on the planet. In hushed whispers, Addie tells Norman that he should appreciate her in public more often, like Dennis does with his wife. Norman says he doesn't have to say it out loud. He also thinks Addie is the most beautiful woman in the world. Addie asks him if he will love her even when she turns ugly over time, and Norman replies that she will always be beautiful to him. Addie seems satisfied with this response. Later at night, Addie surprises Norman another anniversary gift, which is her smoking hot body. He joyfully says that he doesn't know what he did to deserve her, but he's glad he did it anyway. Addie asks him again if he will truly love her no matter what. He promises that he will. The two proceed to share a night of passionate lovemaking. At 3 in the morning, Norman wakes up to find that Addie is out of bed. He goes downstairs to find her and sees that she is working on her laptop, with her back toward him. He decides to sneak up behind her and surprise her by licking her neck. However, as he does this, he is suddenly taken aback. Confused, he says that Addie's skin tastes rotten and sour, almost as if it is rotten flesh. This comment seems to upset Addie a lot, and she storms away crying. Norman follows her into the bathroom to find that she is showering. She seems severely distressed. Norman looks around and he notices that the reflection of Addie in the bathroom mirror shows a strange, humongous creature. He looks back at Addie and sees nothing wrong with her. Approaching the mirror, he wipes it clean and only sees Addie's human body in it. Addie gets out of the shower and asks if something is wrong. Norman apologizes for his earlier comments, and Addie forgives him. As Norman walks out of the bathroom, unsure of what else to say, Addie starts crying. In the morning, Addie makes breakfast for Norman, but he says he has some errands to run first. He kisses Addie before he leaves, and she jokingly asks if she still tastes sour. Norman simply laughs it off, but as he walks to his car, he touches his tongue, sensing something wrong with it. Next, Norman visits Dr. Phillips and shares what's been happening to him. He says that last night when he tasted his wife's skin, it was sour, but this morning when he kissed her, he couldn't taste anything at all. He adds that he can taste the candy bars in front of him and even the disinfectant in the air at the clinic, but he couldn't taste his wife's lips when he kissed her. Dr. Phillips doesn't think Norman's claims are anything to worry about and simply tells him to rest and have a relaxed weekend. After this, Norman drives to Barbara and Dennis' house to see his friend. He is greeted by a distressed Barbara who reveals that last night Dennis left her. Norman notices that the house is very dark and goes to turn on the lights, but Barbara reveals that all the bulbs in the house are broken, which Norman finds very curious. Norman sits down to comfort Barbara, and she reveals that Dennis just went crazy and started yelling, and she's never seen him act like that before. Norman apologizes to her on Dennis' behalf and ensures her that Dennis loves her very much and he'll be back. As he drives away from the house, Addie shows up behind Barbara. Addie says that she can't believe it's happening already, and Barbara warns her that her relationship is next. At night, Addie is writing a new book, while Norman calls out to her. Leaving her work, she goes to him and tells him that she's writing a novel about a woman afraid to lose her man. She mentions that she can't concentrate because of what happened to their friends. Norman promises Addie that he would never walk out on her like Dennis did with Barbara. Norman asks Addie if they should start trying to have a baby, and Addie seems reluctant to even discuss the idea. Next, as Addie prepares dinner, Norman tries to embrace her from behind, but once again he is taken aback by something. This time he claims that he smells something terrible, but when he notices the expression on Addie's face, he just shrugs it off, saying that he forgot to take out the trash. As he leaves, Addie stands in the kitchen, upset and worried. The next morning, Roy is trying to discuss work-related matter with Norman, but he appears to be lost in a thought. He tries to talk to Roy about Addie tasting and smelling different, but Roy doesn't understand what he's saying. After he leaves, Norman gets a call from Dennis, who sounds panicked. He claims that someone or something is following him. Back at the house, Barbara arrives to meet Addie, and she says that she is going to put on a new appearance now because it's time to start over. She shows Addie a few looks, but Addie doesn't seem interested. Barbara insists that Addie's relationship will end soon too, and she should start thinking about her new look as well. Addie is upset by this remark and claims that it's different with her and Norman. She claims that she's given Norman more than just physical intimacy. She's given him true love and friendship as well. Barbara reminds her that no matter what she does for him, she can't change who she is inside. Norman meets Dennis at a public park. He is in a terrible state. He tells Norman that the night of his escape, he saw Barbara in her true form. He adds that she tasted and smelled awful, which catches Norman's attention. But before Norman can question him about it, Barbara appears in a different form. Dennis, who seems to see her true appearance, runs away, while Norman follows, confused because he doesn't know of Barbara's disguise. Dennis ends up running onto the road where he is hit by a car and immediately killed. Keeping Dennis' words in mind at his funeral, Norman meets Barbara and embraces her. He sniffs her like a creep, but all he can smell is her perfume. Norman asks if Dennis was on any medication, and Barbara replies that she isn't sure. She adds that she is now moving away to start a new life somewhere else. Norman embraces her and wishes her well. Later that night, Addie tries comforting Norman over the death of his friend. Norman thinks out loud about how the world grows old and falls apart, but Addie strangely only gets more beautiful over time. This alarms Addie, and she climbs onto his lap and tells him that what happened to Barbara and Dennis doesn't have to happen to them. Norman continues, telling her that she is almost too perfect, and she tries to distract him by making out with him. While they make love, he suddenly feels something slimy on her back. Scared, Norman quickly pulls away from Addie and she starts crying. She gets him to touch her and insists that she is still herself and he's just imagining it all. Norman visits Dr. Phillips again and tells him that last night he felt something slimy on his wife's back, and since then, his sense of touch has diminished completely. He says that he feels like his wife is disappearing or changing right in front of him. Dr. Phillips suggests that what Norman is experiencing may be symptoms of a psychological problem. At night, Norman enters the house with some flowers for Addie to make up for his behavior the night before. He finds all of the lights in the house turned off, and when he turns them on, a bunch of his friends and Addie spring up to surprise him. Addie tells Norman that he has been very stressed lately, so she planned a surprise party for him. Everyone has a great time, and they all tell Norman that he has a great wife. Despite this, Norman seems disturbed and suspicious of this gesture. The bell rings, and Norman opens the door to a woman named Angie. Addie introduces Angie as a new friend of hers, and it is revealed that Angie is just Barbara with a new face. While the party goes on, Norman sits outside thinking. Roy joins him and asks him to enjoy the party that Addie put together. Losing his cool, Norman tries to tell Roy that something is wrong. They never have guests over at the house, and suddenly Addie has thrown a whole party full of people repeatedly telling him what a perfect wife he has and how lucky he is. It's almost as if she wants witnesses who can testify this. He is about to mention Dennis' death, but doesn't know how to explain the suspicious circumstances around it. Roy goes back inside thinking Norman has just had too much to drink. After the party, Norman is sitting by himself in a terrible state, and Addie asks him what's wrong. Norman tells Addie what the doctor said, that these things he's been experiencing with her stem from deeper psychological issues. Addie comforts him, telling him that she knows it will be all right. He apologizes to her for his behavior toward her lately and tells her that he knows she goes above and beyond for him. He mentions to her that he thinks he's going crazy, and to calm him down, Addie tells him maybe he just needs to go on a vacation, and Norman smiles and agrees. Addie goes to make Norman a sandwich while he opens the gift Angie brought to the party. The gift is a set of Russian nesting dolls. Real subtle, Angie. Just then, Norman hears the noise of slimy and heavy footsteps coming from the kitchen as Addie walks around. He turns around to find Addie looking perfectly normal, but her steps still sound slimy. Addie sees him looking at her with a horrified expression on his face and asks him what's wrong. At this point, Norman just breaks down completely. Upset, Addie leaves everything and rushes upstairs crying. Norman continues to break down, trying to convince himself that his wife doesn't sound like that, and it's all in his head. He decides that he won't let his mental illness ruin his marriage and goes upstairs to apologize to Addie. He sees her sitting in their room in the dark and goes to turn on the light. He finds that the lamp bulb has been broken, just like the ones at Barbara's house had been, and gets alarmed. He asks Addie why she's in the dark, and she tells him it's because she doesn't want him to see her. Norman is confused, but Addie goes on to say that it's always the same. After a year of being close to a person, she can no longer control their senses, and they start to see her real form. She thought this time it would be different because their love was more than just surface-level attraction, but it turned out the same as always. She tells him that when he had tasted her, she had been afraid to reveal herself to him, so she had blocked out all his senses, which is why he couldn't taste or feel anything at all. Norman approaches her cautiously, still confused. In front of his very eyes, Addie turns into her true alien form. She explains that when their ship crashed on Earth, she and Barbara tried to make the humans believe they were one of them, but they never make it further than a year with someone. Norman asks who and what she is, and she replies that she's still Addie, the same Addie he fell in love with. She just doesn't look like a human woman on the outside. As Norman backs away in fear, she asks him if he's just like Dennis, or if he's different, and can look beyond her outward appearance. She approaches him, begging him to accept her and love her for what she is inside, but Norman screams in fear, horrified at the sight of her. Next, Norman is taken to the hospital tied to a stretcher because the doctors believe he has lost his mind. Addie in her real form and Angie in her human form watch him. Norman tries to tell the paramedics that Addie is a monster, but when they look at her, they see a normal human woman. He is taken away in the ambulance, as Addie sadly watches her dreams fall apart. Next, Addie is working out in public when she sees Roy jogging nearby. As he approaches her, she suddenly changes her appearance to that of a redhead and introduces herself to Roy as Stacy. The two begin running together, and Addie officially begins her new life. The end. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like our channel and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Also, let us know what movie you would love us to recap for you.